We got 20 people who joined right now, so 21. It grows.
Awesome.
Well, importantly, Doug's here, so that's good. Our first speaker's here.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, you?
Not bad. This is the most people I've seen in weeks.
I haven't had a Zoom, like, actual meeting in, God, like 4 weeks now. It's
Wow,
weird.
how have you avoided that?
I got laid off, so that's how I got to do that.
Congrats, man. That can be I don't know, can be some opportunities there.
Yeah, I mean, Monday I start my new job, so.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's funny is I was like, great, I got all this time. I'm going to do like all these projects I want to do. And then I ended up alone painting kitchen cabinets. By the way, anyone, if you thought about painting your kitchen cabinets, don't do it. It's a terrible, terrible idea. Yes, our kitchen looks great now, but that was 5 weeks of shit I don't want to ever do again.
It sounds exhausting and like super tedious.
Oh, it is. So, yeah, 100%. Oh, well, because I've been yammering on, I blew past the, how's that look at people's screens? Like, is that too much, too enhanced?
People in the back of the room, can you see?
Looks
All right, cool.
So we don't have sponsors because we don't need sponsors for this, I guess. So we're just going to jump right in. Normally we do any job announcements. So if you have a job announcement, what I'd like you to do is just put it into the chat for this. And any of those job postings, I'll add it to the comments for this meetup. So feel free to go ahead and do that. Otherwise, let's jump straight into what's going on in JS land.
Cool. So welcome back, everybody. We took off February. That was our first month that we've missed as an organization. And have you, well, because you've been around since the beginning, have you ever missed a month that wasn't like the planned end of year stuff?
Nope.
Yeah, so there you go. There was one for the record.
Fucking pandemics, man. They don't like care.
Mm-hmm. So welcome back. 81 and 82 came out actually I think we're like on Chrome 83. But I think 82 is one of those where they just like skipped a version number. So we'll cover 83 next time. But for Chrome 81, the release notes are there. The highlight video is there as we always do. And we'll also link this in the comment section. Not a ton of stuff in this one, but so the first thing was the device mode. Those of you familiar with it, where you can make your screen resolution look like a mobile device and you can do throttling and stuff. Now supports the Moto G4, which I suppose is a cool thing. Is that one of those like, is that like I know nothing about Android. Is that cool because it's low end or is it cool because it's high end?
That's an older Android
cool.
device.
Right,
so that's
sweet.
kind of like the standard for, your worst case scenario.
Sweet. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I was suspecting because in that they kind of went back over again how to do CPU throttling and stuff like that. So anyway, so if you do work where you have to support some of these older phones, it now has the G4 so you can check the resolution and stuff like that. The cookies pane in the application panel now shows blocked cookies. So that's good. The network, this one's actually super cool. The network panel now, you can go to any of your network requests. You can right click and copy them. And then on your clipboard, it'll copy a node, the equivalent node fetch request. So if you click on that GIF thing there, it's pretty neat. It also includes the cookie data, which may or may not be necessary. It's actually funny. Yeah, you might want to just enhance. There you go. So you right click it, and then he's going to do it in the console here. But if you paste it, it has like the full fetch request with like everything, like all of the headers and stuff like that. So pretty neat if you wanted to either recreate it or see how it's put together. So what else do we got? Oh, and the console now has more informative errors on failed source maps. That's really it. There were some other little things, but these are kind of just like the highlights. That's all that we've got for that. What are you guys excited about? This will be interesting, actually, doing a JS LAN on a Zoom meeting. What are you guys excited about? Any new stuff? And so we were talking about adding something for the Hive 5, changing that up. But let's first do a little bit more of like anything you guys have heard about that's going on, either in the industry or stuff that you're excited about that you're working on, and then we'll add like a third category here. But first, sort of our normal stuff. Any cool stuff you guys hear going on? What are you guys excited about? Mike, you start.
I was giving everyone 7 seconds to jump in.
Such a good teacher.
Yeah, that's what I learned. Yeah, before the call started, we were sort of talking about the latest ECMA 2020 release, and there's actually a lot of cool features that are in there. Optional chaining, which was something that was available in TypeScript, and then also null coalescing, which are just like the optional chaining is when you've got just like a long list of properties, and at some point one of them might be undefined. So instead of doing like this dot and this dot and like doing a whole bunch of that stuff, you can now just throw in a question mark before the dot, and it'll be like, well, if this is undefined, I'm going to stop here, and that's it. Yeah, thank you, Matt. You knew exactly what I wanted.
That's what he's mean right there.
Actually, if you scroll down a little bit.
Oh, the optional chaining.
Yeah, this is the optional chaining. So this is really neat. So it basically lets you kind of write it's JavaScript, so you can write unsafe code as much as you want, but this will at least give you less errors, hopefully, if you look up something that's not actually there.
What's the double question mark nullish coalescing that you were talking about? What is that?
That's right up here. So instead of doing like this or like basically this fails, it's just a more explicit way to show like this is going to be your default if this is null.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because like I don't know about you guys, like I've done like the ternary before where it's like I just want the first one or the other one. Like I want to check this condition, and if it doesn't work, then just do the second one, but I don't want to have like a third option. That's
right. So what's nice is with the power of both of them, you got to write less shit.
Right. That's interesting. Cool.
That double question mark syntax is even cooler than the or, because it won't go to the right-hand side on false C values. It has to be null.
Sorry, it has to be null or what?
Undefined. But if it's like 0 or an empty string, the left value will still be returned.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, thank you, Brooks. That's awesome. I didn't pick up on that until 2 seconds before you said that. Yeah, in those examples there, like the person profile name is an empty string. And if you do an or, because an empty string is false, it would actually go to the anonymous side, but now it's going to give you the actual value, assuming that it's not undefined or null.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Just really neat things.
Nice.
I really thought dynamic import was kind of cool. I can't really think of a time where I'm going to use this, but I just still think it's cool. Where you can like, oh snap, if this thing happens, cool, import this JavaScript file now. I don't know. I just thought that was actually pretty insane. But
oh, that's neat. Instead of like having it be forced to be like at the top level of the file.
Right. So you don't have to like import some giant JavaScript file if like for whatever reason you don't need to. And if you had this really specific case, you can import it dynamically.
I actually think I might use that quite a bit. Well, okay, so
give a talk on it.
My use case is I want to load up random animations on a web page. And so I could have a random generator that just goes through an array and it dynamically imports a different file based upon that, which would run its run command and give me the random animation.
Cool.
Right on.
Sweet.
Yeah, that would probably help with like bundle sizes and things like that. So you're not importing everything. You're just, but I wonder, I don't know. Tree shaking is a word. I wonder if this like works with tree shaking. I don't know.
That would depend on how you did it. If you did default exports, tree shaking is a no.
That answers that. Thank you.
Cool.
Always
So
named it
what are you guys
exports.
excited about? How about high five
Node
moments?
14 came out. That's I don't know if I'm excited about that, but I just know it's a thing that happened.
There was a fun moment where Cloudflare released support for COBOL on their cloud workers due to the pandemic and the need for developers to work on all the financial legacy applications.
Yeah, I did hear about that. Also, like Firefox and Chrome had to re-enable it too, right?
I don't know about that.
All right, what was that about again, Doug?
Cloudflare enabled COBOL on their cloud workers. So instead of writing JavaScript or whatever else, you can run COBOL in the cloud.
Sweet.
Yeah, the thing that I'm thinking about for Firefox and Chrome, it may not have been the same thing, but I remember they had to enable. Oh, that's it. They had to re-enable TCL 1.0, I think, for basically government workers that have to work on super old systems. I'll look into that, but don't worry. As always, I will find links to all these things. Even there's only like a very few that I haven't been able to find the actual information on what it was. Also, you know what? We have a section for like just high five moments, like anything you've had this, last couple months have been like, fuck yeah, or whatever. Also, how are you staying sane? I don't know. Just thought we'd put these out there. Like, if you have tips for, if you're an introvert, this might be heaven for you. Or if you're an extrovert like myself, this is kind of fucking torture. So, what are you doing? What are people doing? And for me, it's been drinking a lot, but
Apparently you're not alone. It's a thing.
I see a wine glass.
There you go. Yeah, I got like a cheers in the background there. What else you got?
Beer in a wine glass.
Well, I am starting to create my own automation framework. I'm in QA since getting laid off. So using Nightwatch.js. So that's fun.
Sweet. What do you like most about Nightwatch?
Well, I've never actually automated with JS before, so I've just mostly done C#. It's frustrating to get it to pick your browser, the right browser, even though you have Chrome driver, it doesn't like to pick it. It's very frustrating, but it's easy. It's a lot faster than what I'm used to. That's not really saying much, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't have a whole lot of experience. I just started that today.
That's okay. And then, so how did you get started? Like, if somebody else wanted to learn more about it, do they have like on their website or where did you?
Yeah, their website has everything you need. It has all the instructions. You just go through their documentation. They'll walk you through it.
Awesome. Cool. Sweet. Thank you for sharing. Who else has got? It's probably that Nightwatch show. That's probably what she's talking about. Who else has got stuff? And that was a perfect example. Any like high five moments, like doesn't have to be a huge industry changing thing. It could be something that's just new to you, something that you just discovered, or even if it's just like, that's what I always say, like, even if it's like you finally figured out this gnarly bug that, that your significant other or other friends might not care about, but you can share it here because we'll understand and be happy for you. Anything else that anyone's excited about this month?
Gatsby falls into that category for me. I had heard a lot about it, but not used it before, and then had the opportunity to build a site around Markdown content and the ability to query the metadata through GraphQL and just generate the entire site from this one set of files on build and do everything, along with that as far as like SEO optimization and all of those kind of things was really impressive for having used it for the first time.
Super cool. And again, same as I was asking Sarah, for people that want to get started, did you find that their website was pretty informative, or how did you get up and running on Gatsby if somebody else wants to check it out?
Yeah. I think I mainly used the documentation and the plugins that they had on their main site, and it was all really easy to follow with a bit of background in React.
Okay.
I think there's also some very good tutorials on, I think, egghead.io, but Gatsby also seems to release free videos of training on YouTube as well.
Okay, cool. I like that category that you added at the bottom there, Matt. So for, all of us have been doing this now for some amount of weeks, if not maybe a couple of months for some people. Does anybody have like a good story about, hey, I was kind of going crazy, or it could be like, I was feeling really unproductive, or, something along those lines until I did like X? Any good tips that you stumbled across that made you either feel better or work better, or something like that you want to share? Good. Matt put drugs. Perfect. Which reminds me, as you guys are thinking about like what you want to share, that reminds me, like, I love that like the essential business thing was like, grocery stores and pharmacies, and everybody flipped out. And like the next day they were like, and dispensaries and liquor stores, don't worry, those are also essential. So that's not just you.
Apparently gun stores, because that's essential.
The what?
The ammunition gun stores.
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah, better stockpiling right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We have a real answer from Brooks. That meditation's been really helpful. That's cool. Yeah, I bet. Any other good ideas that you guys have stumbled across that have been helpful?
I've been going on a lot of walks with the dogs.
I've been running, and I'm like a terrible I'm not a good runner at all. Like real slow, real short. But it's been nice for my mental health. But then also like it's kind of like a good thing. I don't know. I think it's kind of fun to do things, challenge myself, do things that I'm not good at, and just do it anyway. So, yeah.
Totally. And so I'm just curious, when you've been running, have you been wearing a mask?
No, but I like avoid people way more than 6 feet. So
yeah, no, I was just curious because I was thinking about maybe trying to go for a run or go for a bike ride, and I was like, I feel like that would be really hot. There's like, I guess you're like breathing hard right back in your face.
The one thing that I don't understand is I see like a group of friends that are going on like a bicycle ride, and they're like trying to social distance, but they're running single file like behind each other. I'm like,
right,
isn't if you're coughing or shit, like, how's that not? And then I just give up.
Yep. And then you just get behind all of them and just breathe in all of their exhaust. So Sarah, you're saying varying up your types of workouts has worked out for you?
Yeah, I unfortunately had an injury going into this, so I have to kind of lay low on the running. But the running outside is nice. Mm-hmm. And then like boot camp type stuff online.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there you go. Hit the 10 minutes and you're done, 15 minutes and you're done kind of thing. Nice.
Or 50, but yeah, sure.
Well, okay, well. Legolas, working outside on the patio. Yeah, and it's definitely getting warm enough now. Lots of home projects.
Wait, who did you say?
Legolas. I'm looking at the chat.
Wait, Legolas, you're here? Or maybe I knew a guy, David. He went by nickname Legolas, but that's because he looked like Legolas. He had platinum blonde hair, straight, like super far down past his shoulders.
Cool.
Who else would it be? Come on.
There he is.
So Matt, so we had varying up types of workouts, or boot camp or HIIT, like HIIT workouts. We had working outside on the patio. Oh, cool. Thanks, Walter. So Walter shared, here, I'll add this here.
A friend of mine does yoga online.
Awesome. Very cool. So yoga online, super cool. Table tennis. Nice. Cool. Or pong ping. Okay. Sweet. Okay, cool. This has been great. Animal Crossing, nice. I bet Brooks's Animal Crossing is super built out and detailed.
I don't know what that is.
I haven't played it, but so Brooks, correct me if I'm wrong. I've purely derived this from commercials, and I know nothing else about it. But is it basically like The Sims, but for Nintendo? Brooks?
It's kind of its own genre, I would say. I mean, I would just say it's Nintendo's answer to like previous Animal Crossings, but then also in a world that Stardew Valley exists.
Yeah, but hold on. You know, like remember when you were in elementary school and they say like don't define a word by using the word? Like if you tell me it's like other Animal Crossings, I have no frame of reference what that means. I have zero context.
Yeah, that's probably fine. I would say like I can't describe it. I would just say the best way to discover it is to go watch somebody play it on YouTube or Twitter.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. It's a good cliffhanger for all of us, and it'll give us something to do tonight.
If you can't describe it, do you really know what it is?
I mean, Animal Crossing is Animal Crossing. Besides
Perfect.
that, I don't really know.
Yeah, that's hard to refute. Okay. Great. This has actually been pretty cool. A good idea, Matt. I like the different take on being able to, especially because things are weird now. So it's nice that we're switching it up and just kind of doing something different there. So cool. We'll probably
shit got weird in 2016 and just keeps getting weirder.
That's true. So we'll probably stop it there. Like I said, I really enjoyed that idea. We'll see if for next month if we come up with some other cool question. And maybe what we'll do for all you cool cats and kittens, we'll put out the question ahead of time so you can think about it ahead of time.
And if none of you have watched Tiger King,
everyone
do it.
has. Come on.
Just do it.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. That was fun. So Matt, what's next?
We have our first speaker, Doug Whitney.
All right. This would be a perfect time if you guys want to get something to drink or pizza. Now would be a good time to do it while Doug's getting set up and getting plugged in.
How do I stop? I don't want to share anymore. Okay. Doug, are you able to hit share? I know I locked things down on this, so I'm not sure what I've locked down.
I think so. Let me see.
Yeah, I see a share button down at the bottom. Front and center, green highlighted box.
Kim, what you cooking?
Ramen.
Nice.
Comfort food.
Old Faithful.
Walter, what beer is that? That's a good one. Love me a milk stout nitro.
Yes, milk stout.
How much banana bread has everybody made?
None.
0. Emily, it looked like you started laughing. So I'm assuming a lot.
I just don't have any spoiled bananas, but banana bread is my absolute favorite, and it's on my to-do list. That's very exciting. Do you have pictures? You post it in the food channel in Denver Devs.
I am curious. I've seen so much on Instagram. Everyone's like, finally, I'm going to make sourdough. How many people have made sourdough bread now?
Not yet.
Doesn't look like yet.
That'll be our question for next month. That'll be everybody paste your favorite sourdough recipes.
Oh man, that game was a nightmare.
Hold on one moment.
Sure.
We'll allow it. It's
Thank
not
you.
like we've done this before yet.
Oh, we've got a sourdough. Christine said her fiance makes sourdough loaf or pizza every other day. Wow.
Yeah, I'm spoiled.
And
gaining weight.
Sourdough.
Jeez. Yeah, don't let that one get away. That sounds like a winner. Very cool. All right, Doug, you ready to roll?
Yeah, I think so. Cool.
Everybody, Doug Whitney. Woo! Woo! You can't hear the applause and everyone's on mute.
Cool. Well, it's good to talk with everybody. I am talking about JavaScript references, and I chose this topic in part because I think it is one of those things that I know I've always kind of glossed over and kind of felt like I had an understanding of, but it's always fun in these talks to kind of explore and really dig into these topics. So this is kind of a really brief look at a deep topic, but my hope is that it helps uncover some of the pitfalls that come along with references in JavaScript and how to work around those and be aware of it and take advantage of some of the power that references give you as well. I work for a mostly distributed company that is based here in Denver called MetaRouter, and work on the UI team there. So I don't know if anyone besides Matt remembers this game. I couldn't even give you an era for when this is from, probably early 80s, but the graphics were actually just this good. And this is kind of what I think about when putting this together and remembering all of the interview questions that I've had to answer about references and just this topic in general. So the first question that I want to answer is why should you care about this topic? And for me, it is in part because of the growing complexity of client-side apps, in particular in dealing with larger and larger data structures and more responsibility on the client side for transforming those, and also typical app can have data coming from multiple sources, and you're transforming it for various destinations and different uses. And without an understanding of references and mutations and some of the side effects, these things can be very, very difficult to understand why your app is behaving in a certain way, or why a bug is so hard to trace. And on that note, it's helpful in understanding a class of bugs that can be subtle in tracking back why values are kind of changing out from under you when you don't expect those kind of things to happen. And it's helpful also in just understanding discussions about immutability and mutations, and when those kind of things make sense and when to avoid mutating things in place. And along with that, the persistent data structures, which are now becoming larger and larger part of modern frameworks and state management. So this is just one quick example. There are many ways that these things kind of bite you if you're not thinking about it. But we have an array of objects here, and we're mapping over that. And on first thought, map does not mutate the original array itself, but however the callback to map can. And so what you can see by the output here of this this operation is that not only have we doubled the score for both of these players, and then additionally mutated the score at the 0th position, but we've also updated the original objects in the scores array. And because we're, while we're using map, we're still updating the contents of these original references in the scores array. So just, again, one quick example of how, you may think using a functional approach like map kind of protects you, but if you are not careful, you can still mutate things in unintended ways. And if you use the scores array later on, it might not be what you expect. And as a result of some of these kind of problems or gotchas, there are a number of ways to deal with this at the native level and the library level, with varying degrees of effectiveness, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But given the array of different options, it is sometimes hard to know which is the right approach if what you want to do is have immutable data. So the kind of first thing that comes to mind is assigning objects to consts, right? And I'll step back a bit and mention that, when we're talking about references for the purpose of this short talk, we're talking mostly about object references. Of course, it doesn't apply to primitive values like strings and numbers and booleans, but when you're dealing with objects, it's not unusual that you can have multiple identifiers kind of pointing at the same object reference. So ways to avoid object mutations, const doesn't really do the job. It creates a read-only reference, but that does not prevent you from mutating the object itself. And then there are more granular approaches using some object methods like define property. And this allows you to create a kind of constant property within an object. But, again, that is not creating an immutable object itself. Going a little further, you can prevent addition of properties to objects. There are things like object seal and object freeze, which kind of increasingly limit what can be changed and mutated on your object, but still this is a shallow freeze. So if you have nested data structures, those nested structures are not going to be affected by object freeze. Of course, you can you could construct a kind of deep freeze, but that may or may not be what you want to do, and may have unintended consequences if you kind of recursively freeze everything in the object. And then at the library level, there are different implementations and different approaches for ways to avoid mutations and kind of guaranteeing that you are working in a known state. One that was popular when React was a bit newer was Immutable.js, which I think was originally from Facebook. And the idea there is persistent data structures with what is called a mutative API, which it allows you to have an API that makes it look like you are updating the underlying, like the original structure, but in essence, it is preserving the previous version. So it gives you kind of the best of both worlds there, that you can create updates to data without losing the original state of it. The kind of disadvantage of immutable and other library implementations is that, one, it's not native. It doesn't make everything immutable by default. So you are kind of in this world where you're shuffling things back and forth between native objects and then into this immutable land. And it's not a small library or API. You're working with new concepts and just a surface area to deal with there. More recent kind of approach is a library called Immer, which I believe is from the creator of MobX and some of those related projects. And this is really interesting in that it does much of the same thing that Immutable does in the end, but it uses a different approach where actions like pushing a new item onto an array, it gets intercepted and uses this kind of model of the current state, the draft state, and the next state. The advantage of something like this is that it is a smallish library and very kind of limited API. It really is just down to a function signature that kind of resembles this current draft next sequence. This is newer. I've not worked with this one directly. I have worked with Immutable, and again, Immutable, while it does what it does well, it is not always a great developer experience. Another option, another more functional approach is using Ramda and the lenses concept. And this allows you to immutably update object properties using methods like set and over. It gives you a functional approach. So for nested data, you can compose lenses, or you can take advantage of some of the built-in helpers like lens path to access those deeply nested structures and create a new immutable state. And while all of those are useful and have their place, there's also this thought which I think is useful to keep in mind. This is from Kyle Simpson, the author of You Don't Know JS. That you don't always want to go completely immutable. There are cases where it is very helpful in kind of a defensive programming approach, and some guarantees that you can get out of that. But there are also cases where you may just need to rethink the general approach of at what level you're accessing data. Do your data structures need to be broken down differently so that immutability is not such a concern? And in a lot of cases, what is necessary is not always full immutability, but you would like some kind of guarantee that if I need to do some operations on this object, how can I guarantee that I'm not bringing unintended references along with me? And I think that's why this Stack Overflow question is so popular over 11 years. This is a loaded question for a number of reasons. It has to do, with how you handle deeply nested structures and accessors, and just what kind of things you expect to happen in this algorithm, because there are also prototype properties and hidden properties to deal with, and not a clear answer on, or not one answer on how this should be done. One approach is something like clone deep from Lodash, where it's based on the structured clone algorithm that's used by post message for sending data across workers. And it covers most cases, but similar to the implementation of the structured clone algorithm itself, it doesn't guarantee an exact copy. There are things that can't be easily cloned or copied into the new object, but it does ensure that your not going to be dealing with unintended references. At the same time, it's not the most efficient approach. And kind of going back to the quote from Kyle Simpson about if you require immutability everywhere and deep freeze all the way down, you may need to rethink your structures or how you're accessing data. But hopefully, with a bit more understanding of some of the pitfalls, and here are a few, right? So one is a shallow clone when you really wanted a deep clone, and that can happen using things like object assign, or using, for instance, Lodash's clone method in place of deep clone. That might work for a given case, but if the object structure changes out from underneath you, that can again have some kind of surprising unintended consequences. You may also find that a shallow clone works until some other change introduces something where the nested data structures are now being modified from a different part of your program. And then, the other pitfalls are just unintended mutations when you are doing things that you don't realize are going to change the original set that you're working with, and then you continue to use that original set as a source of truth. So, hopefully with that in mind, references are always a bit complicated, and there is a lot more to the topic. I'll include some links in the slides that I post in the comments for the meetup, but hopefully this sheds a little bit of light on references in JavaScript.
Can open it up to questions.
Would it be a problem to just do JSON.parse JSON.stringify objects?
I mean, I've done that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the approaches that some of the libraries use. It just requires that, obviously that your object can be parsed, and I don't think it's the fastest implementation when you're dealing with a lot of objects.
Also,
the other
doesn't
thing
work
that
with functions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work with anything that overrides, I think, toString, or there are ways that you can create an object that fakes out its JSON, and that will break it.
Well, don't do that.
What if I'm using a library that did that and I didn't necessarily know it?
Why'd you use the library?
And you probably deserve it.
Legolas, I think you just like pain.
Or I'm using a library that uses 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 that.
Sounds like NPM.
Exactly. I mean, just left trim everything. Come on, it'll be fine.
Any other questions for Doug? Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Good stuff. Everyone golf clap. Yep.
Hey, that was so fun. We should do that. That was great.
What, the snap fingers or clap?
Well, no, just like seeing like everybody on the Brady Bunch setup, just kind of like at the same time. That was very.
I wish you would display all the people instead of just this like paginated grid. Awesome. All right. Our next speaker is Kyle Coverley, of which, dude, you really blew up the meetup channel. Oh, sorry. You didn't.
I wasn't trying to. Apparently, this
your comebacks were funny as shit, though. So, no, full support for you. That guy was kind of being a dick, but it was pretty funny to read.
Yeah. So yeah, prepare for the most controversial talk of the year, apparently. But hopefully we all learned something too.
Kyle Coverley, everybody.
Hey, gabba gabba hey. Hey. Oops, these are my notes. You're not supposed to see behind the scenes. There we go. All right, so this is Real Agile. I'm Kyle Coverley, and we're going to be talking about how some of these Agile ideas kind of work under the hood and why they work the way that they do. And hopefully this will end up clearing up some confusion about where some of these things come from and why they have or have not been successful when you've tried to do them. So to start with, what the fuck is Agile? So I think that this picture illustrates it pretty well. So if the cruise ship is trying to change direction, it takes a lot of knots, I think is the appropriate term for that, to do that. Versus a team of speedboats, they can turn on a dime. Now they have to be a lot more coordinated. They have to be in good communication, because a whole lot of damage can happen if they're not doing that. They don't know where they're going and they collide. But if all of those things are true, they can change direction a lot faster. So who gives a shit? Why would we want to change direction quickly? If we know where we're going, why don't we just go in a straight line? So a couple reasons. One is that reality is really messy. This is like a best laid plans kind of thing. And also, like, your straight line approach to how the product should work might have been true at one point in history. But the external environment of your project changes pretty rapidly. So you need to be able to account for that. Another reason is that communication is lossy. So this could be within your team. This could be your understanding of your customers or your users. This could be everybody thinks they're building the same thing, and it turns out they're not at all. So we need to be able to accommodate that. And then also, prediction is really hard. Prediction is not a thing that anybody is naturally very good at until we grow our like magic sixth sense organ. So this is the first time I've said this metaphor out loud. So thank you for being willing to let me try this on you. But this was like a shower thought one day that I'm happy to share. So these three guys are trying to dig through this rock to get to the land underneath. Imagine like a Mario style thing. They're trying to get through this. And so they make the plan to just go straight down. Problem is that they end up going through a lot of like really hard rock. It's not necessarily the best way to do that. But if they go a little bit at a time and readjust course each time, they can actually take a much easier way. And then as they're getting closer, they can also survey the external environment so they don't end up drilling down into a Mario style water trap and instead on the green grassy land with Koopas and Goombas and stuff. So how come you're not doing this if it's such a good idea? We have all these like awesome Agile tools at our disposal. And like so many things in life, the ones that are really easy to do don't actually matter that much. The ones that matter, collective commitment, self-organizing teams, retros, quality practices, some of these kinds of things. The ones that your team probably does, at least some version of, sprints, user stories, points, stand-ups, these actually don't matter all that much. They're not like useless tools or anything. In fact, there's a ton of utility in those, but they're not really at the core of this. They're right on the surface of it. So there's actually a pretty rich history behind these things. And I think of this as a history of control and freedom in business. This goes back almost 150 years at this point, actually. So Agile, like that word goes back to 2001. But even a lot of the ideas that it was specifically talking about were like early and mid 90s. They got together the people that had made a lot of these like lightweight approaches to software development in the 90s, and then kind of culled a best of the ideas in Utah in 2001, and now we call that Agile. That was Scrum, that was XP, that was a framework called Crystal Clear, lots of that kind of stuff. But if we go back even further, we find out that they were influenced by a lot of people also. And really, this goes back to about 1875 with old Fred Taylor. So Fred Taylor, in my mind, is like probably the biggest villain in business history. So he worked in a factory, and he was appalled by how inefficiently his fellow workers worked. And so when he became a manager at the factory, he's like, I know what I'll do. I'll come up with this scientific way to tell everybody the one right way to do everything, and then we're going to optimize production for the plant. This spread like gangbusters, not because it was successful. This is an important like distinction on it. It didn't actually work that well, but it sounded like it should have. It sounded like the boss was in control, and if things aren't going the right way, well, it's because the workers are lazy. And so he had some disciples. Gann and Emerson were probably the biggest ones amongst them. And some of these contributions are so deeply rooted in business culture that it's hard to like imagine a time when they didn't exist. But management hierarchies, somebody came up with that. Bonuses, somebody came up with that. The idea that like we're going to plan how the next year goes, that was like a contribution to management that somebody made. So on the other side of this, around the turn of the century, we get this philosopher named C.I. Lewis. C.I. Lewis comes up with symbolic logic, and rather than like the control and structure and hierarchy that was happening on the Taylorist side, he was like, how about we stick with what works? How about we treat people more humanely? So he starts down this line. And then over the next century, we see these two schools of thought develop kind of independently. And at different times, they were complementary. So Deming and Drucker were both very popular mid-century thinkers that had like a little bit of respect for each other. And I put Drucker on this side. Even though Drucker had some very like business freedom kinds of ideas, because his major contribution to management was this thing called MBO, which is a way of like structuring how you reward employees. And then his like biggest disciple was Jack Welch, who I would call probably like the biggest, not to speak ill of the dead or anything, but probably the biggest modern villain in business. He's the guy who came up with stack ranking, which is we rank every single employee in the company and then we fire the bottom 10% or 20% or something like that. And so all of these ideas kind of build on each other. But just like that, on the freedom side, these ideas build on each other also. The freedom side is very focused on output, and is way more loose about how we get to that output. So my favorite hero in this regard is probably Deming, but Taiichi Ohno and the TPS system, that's where Kanban comes from, and we still use that today. And a lot of the ideas that are like core to the Agile process were really rooted in a lot of that mid-century kind of thinking. And so after 2001, these ideas still developed. Agile's been pretty dominant for about 20 years as far as like capturing hearts and minds. Holacracy was heavily influenced by it, which is like a framework for self-management. And then modern Agile is an attempt at like taking the things that we learned over the last 20 years about Agile and like formalizing those. Now, Agile was so successful and the control side was so like thoroughly vilified that they just started adopting some of the same terms. So safe is completely indistinguishable from any of the like hierarchical control structures that this control side has contributed, but it has the word Agile in it because, oh, everybody loves Agile now and it's just a word, and stop being such an academic purist about this kind of stuff. But really, it's very firmly rooted in the control side. Okay, so this gives us some background on Agile. There's a couple like primary categories that I kind of want to hit in this talk. One is flow, The other is team structure. Third one is quality. And the fourth one is measurement. So I'm going to talk about a couple ideas that I'd like to share in all four of these categories, if you'd be so kind. Actually, before I move on though, I just dropped a bunch of like management history and like Agile background and stuff. I want to pause here real quick. Any like immediate questions about history of Agile or what changing direction means or any of those kinds of things?
I think you're good.
All right. So first topic in flow. So this is a diagram of waterfall. Waterfall, by the way, actually did come from this Winston Royce, 1970. That's the origin of like waterfall as applied to software development. But it's not flow, it's batch. We do all the feasibility, then we do all the planning, and then we do all the design. So we batch these things together. The most common, I think, misunderstanding that I see about Agile is that Agile is a bunch of mini waterfalls, and it's super not true. That's also not flow. You're just doing smaller batches, and you're doing them more than once. It's better, it's an improvement, and really this is what we call iterative development. Agile is iterative, but there are other ways to do iterative development, and that's a pretty common one. What flow is being is releasing regularly, and all of these different things that we see in the software development lifecycle, we're never not doing any of those things. We're always planning, we're always designing, we're always testing, we're always building. There's no enforced order on that. So if I could come up with one way that I would describe flow, it's no phases. As soon as phases come into it, you're not flowing anymore, you're batching. And so like phases kind of sound good on their face. You go, okay, well, we're gonna do this in these 3 phases, and the thought process goes something like this. We take our important geniuses in the company. They're the people who actually understand the business, the dollars and cents. They're the ones out there talking to the customers, and they can see the big picture. They see how this fits into the portfolio. And hey, if we're going to build something, we got to design the whole thing before we build any of it. And so then we go to this building phase. Now that all that work is done and we don't have to do it anymore, now we can get these expensive jerk developers in here. We don't want to waste their time because they're super expensive. And so luckily we did all the thinking for them up front. They don't want to talk to users. They don't want to talk to customers. They're scared of people. You've seen them from like TV and movies and stuff. They get all gay, good, Jerry Lewis anytime they're around another human. And really, I think what they need to do, if we can just kind of aim them in the right direction, that's where we're really going to get productive. And then once their work is done, now we can get the cheap idiots in. All they need to do is verify that the nerds did their job correctly. They're also going to catch all the bugs that our expensive jerks made. And you know what? Since like this really isn't even the product per se, we could probably outsource that. Maybe we offshore it. We have a team overseas maybe do all this testing. And I kind of like it when the testing team is playing off of the developers. They're really kind of holding them accountable. So like, and also since our expensive jerks are so expensive and smart, then they're not going to have all that much to do anyway. So we don't need to allocate all that much time for them. The problem is that meanwhile, the users are completely removed from this entire process and have no clue what the fuck is happening. And also, this is not accounting for any kind of reality. In these early stages of the planning, we're like, oh no, it's just gonna be a straight shot all the way down. Oh, we might need to make some minor adjustments here or there, but they're unable to turn quickly. And this is very like control style thinking. This is gonna happen, then this, then this, then this. And as soon as something doesn't match up to that, everything falls apart. for example. What often happens is without talking to like any actual people, our important geniuses remind themselves to put themselves in the user's mind. That actually happened to me once on a project. I was like, yo, are we gonna like talk to any actual users of this thing? And the response I seriously got was, oh God, that's a good point. All right, everybody think like a user for a second. Then my table flipped. So after these people are done with their important planning, they move on to the next project because we're trying to maximize 100% capacity. Everybody's staying busy all the time. So they go on to something else. And all these plans, the big project binder, that gets handed off to the dev team who can't understand any of it. And also, while all that planning was happening, they lost a person. And they're like, oh, he was the only person who knew how to do this shit. So like, how are we gonna do this? Also, some of this stuff is nonsensical. And eventually they go, you know what, job's a job. Just do your shit, cash your paycheck, move on to the next project. And then they go on to the next project because we got to keep everybody busy, 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 busy. And the testers come in and they go, I'm sorry, I'm only now becoming a part of the conversation. I could have helped you with a lot of this shit if we'd been talked to much earlier. And also, this stuff that the devs did, this doesn't work. I don't even know why they would think that it works. Also, we get a big time gap in there because they were also allocated to some other project. And then dev fixes the bugs that they think the testers found. And then the competitors launch a competing product that's way better. And the tester goes, no, I'm not happy. What are you talking? This isn't fixed either. It's just broken in a different way. And then the customer finally sees the product and they don't like it. So that, I think, that sounds a lot more like what actually happens in software project management than the idyllic scenario. So there's some reasons why this kind of like predictive planning doesn't work very well. So one of them is increased WIP and inventory increased risk. So this is going back mid-century. This is where work in progress kind of became part of business vocabulary. Work in progress is stuff you've started but haven't finished. And inventory is another word for that, but you can also apply this to physical inventory. This is like, oh, we have this big warehouse of things that haven't shipped out yet. They're not in customers' hands. So that's also a kind of work in progress. And the problem with that is that holding on to WIP and inventory radically increases your risk. As long as that isn't done, you run the risk of the requirements going stale. So maybe it was the exact right thing when you built it, but the longer you hold on to it, the less likely that's going to continue to be the case. Also, like in physical inventory, you have the concept of spoilage. So like if you have food, the food goes bad. We're dealing with this all over the place right now in America, or worldwide really. And, but you also get this with technical stuff too. So I have this feature, it's done, whenever you want to ship it. Oh, womp womp, it's with jQuery and an unsupported version of Node and a. So you also get spoilage with technical products also. So all of the more inventory you're holding on to and the longer you hold on to it, the higher your risk profile is. Also, when you're predicting, there's no way you can predict for like every possible external factor. Case in point, right fucking now, nobody was going to predict that a pandemic would shut down the global economy. But if you can change direction quickly, you didn't have to. You can go, oh, whoa, everything is different, so let's make some different choices. If you had invested heavily and generated inventory and all these kinds of things, much more difficult to do that. Also, the way that like predictive teams try to account for all this variability is they make buffers. So you do time buffers in your estimates. You hire extra people for whatever kind of situation you might need to be in. And so you generate a ton of waste in the process. This can be like, I don't know, I've been working here for 3 months and they haven't found anything for me to do. Or they have this great team, they're working great, and they find out that the product needs are slightly different. So they have to lay off half the company. But like, that's how you handle irregularities in predictive planning. In Agile, you just change direction. And then also slow feedback loops. So this is within the team. If something isn't working about that long process, this one, we don't actually get the feedback loop to fix what the purple cats are doing until we're all the way through this, until the next time they do their big batch planning. If they're working in small increments, if there's something the team is doing that isn't working, the team can fix it. If there's something that they release to users that isn't working, they can fix it. But they can only do that if they get the chance to do this rapidly. And so by rapidly, we're talking like weeks, not months, days, not weeks, that kind of thing. And then the last point on this is that it's very difficult to get bought in on somebody else's plan. If somebody else does all the hard thinking, the genius work, and then just tells you what to do, that's very disempowering. I'll give you a relevant example. There's a training, some people on this call have been through it before. It's the ballpoint game. I facilitated this exercise 40 times. It's a very good illustration of how flow works on an Agile team, but ultimately it's a 25-minute game where people pass plastic balls around. It means literally nothing. And every single time I have facilitated this exercise, people are like screaming and high-fiving and, oh my God, we did it, everybody, with this thing that doesn't even fucking mean anything. But the difference is that they came up with the way that they play the game on their own. That they own that plan. And it's so much more easy to get excited about something that you collaboratively came up with all these people. And conversely, if you come up with a plan that you don't actually have to live with the consequences of, you don't have to sleep in your shit, you tend to do some pretty bonkers things and make really subpar choices because you don't, there's no feedback loop with you either. So here's what I think should happen to encourage flow. This team goes, all right, we're all working together. We want to build something useful. And then the user goes, this sucks. And they go, all right, well, what about this change that we made? And they go, nope, I absolutely hate this. And so we move on to the next project. Not every idea that every company or team comes up with is a winner. That's completely fine. You don't want that to be the case, because if every single idea or project or whatever you start on has to be a winner, you get way too conservative with what you're willing to try. And that ends up killing companies over time. So they go, all right, well, try something else. We're going to build something useful. And the guy goes, this is okay. I go, all right. How about this this new feature that we made? I go, Google came out with it. I like theirs better. Whatever. Try something else. Luckily, you found this out really early on in the project before you hired all those testers and set up the offshore account and all that kind of stuff. You just try something different. I go, all right, we want to build something useful. He goes, all right, this is fine. I go, what about now? Like, I feel like you made it a little bit worse, actually. You go, okay, cool. What about this? I go, awesome. We love it. We're able to respond to changes in our external environment. We're able to change direction. Okay, so that's big picture, what's happening with a project. Within an iteration, when we're doing these little cycles, the process kind of looks like this. And this is why we don't have phases within a cycle either, why these aren't mini waterfalls. Is they go, all right, we're building a boat. So everybody starts trying to build a boat. And they go, all right, well, we made a shape that floats. And then somebody on the team sees it and goes, well, hang on, how's this supposed to get across land? It has to get across land too. And everybody else goes, oh, fuck, I completely forgot that was part of this also. Yeah, this won't go across land. I guess it kind of needs to be more like a car than a boat. It does still need to float, but it kind of needs to do a little bit of both, I guess. All right, well, what if we slap wheels on it? It's like, that's not working. Actually, since you slapped the wheels on the boat though, I sort of feel like I could change this hull and it would still float and it would like work on land. And so they go, oh, wow, this is actually working pretty good. And then you build a floating car. It's different than what you thought you were going to do at the beginning, but you were allowing a lot of opportunity for the people working on this to use their great big expensive brains to actually solve problems. And solving problems is a lot easier to do visually than in any other way. That like, oh, the customer's got to see it. But that's kind of true. You can't describe the future to a user. You can show it to them and they go, this sucks, or not. And like the dev team kind of works the same way. There's a lot of this problem solving that like, it's grueling and exhausting to try to get it right up front. And it's kind of a game that no one can win. And so instead, we just let it be free. We let it be chaotic. We embrace change and we change direction as often as we need to. So the reason that this works is that these tight feedback loops mean that we don't have to predict as much anymore. Like you can lawyer ball it a little bit and say like, well, everything is like some amount of prediction, but I can predict the weather today a lot easier than I can predict the weather a year from now or 6 months from now. And so we're just trying to reduce the time frame that we have to operate on that. Having dedicated teams that, that everybody was together on that radically simplifies resource management. Because in the predictive model, we have to time, all right, these people come in, and then these people come in, and then these people come in, and then these people go to this project. That's exhausting and also like impossible to control for all the external variables. People winning the lottery, some technology being more difficult than you assumed, left pad, pandemics, whatever. And so having people dedicated exclusively to a thing takes that entire thing off the table. And then the collective commitment. This idea is that, and I'll talk about this more in a little bit, but the idea of a collective commitment is that we're all bought in on this. We came up with this idea together, and that makes us way more excited about how it works. And it makes us feel like we can change the things that aren't working. Okay, another topic in flow is sustainable pace, or why crunch time is fucking stupid. So first reason why crunch time is dumb is that tired people do bad work. And I'm gonna expand on each of these, but also burning out people is really expensive. It's a problem that's caused by predictive planning. And those are 3 things I'm gonna talk about. So first one, tired people do bad work. So these are the documented effects of fatigue. Wow, these are the people I want making my software. I'll bet all the software they make, like during crunch time, I'll bet it's really good shit. I bet they also don't make any mistakes that they then immediately have to fix. So the next time you're asking the developers to stay late, this is what you're injecting into your software. So the burnout effect. All right, so you burn out the team, they did the crunch time, they got the release. All right, now what do you have to deal with? So, all right, you have a $100,000 developer that burned out, quit, now we gotta find somebody else. So a fully burdened $100,000 developer is like $150,000. This is with the employer side of the taxes, this is with all your benefits, this is with everything else that goes along with having an employee. 100,000 is probably more like 150. They also cost on average about 25,000 to recruit. It's a little bit less than that. It's 23 if you're doing it internally. It's 32 if you're using an agency on average. Then there's the $6,000 you're going to pay for 2 weeks of like onboarding and environment setup and like all that bullshit. And then you're going to pay another $12,000 while they figure out how your code base works. So that's how much it costs. In addition to the ongoing expenses of having that developer, losing a developer costs you $42,000. But that's very difficult to model on a spreadsheet. Actually, that isn't that difficult to model on a spreadsheet, but it has like some other problems that go along with that too. Because as soon as that person burns out, everybody else on the team goes, I think I'm kind of burned out too. And that person got a better job. Maybe I can get a better job. There's a whole bunch, and like you lose all of the institutional knowledge that they've accrued. So there's a lot of like intangible costs to losing developers also. You want to save money, you like are crunched or something, retain your team. It's very expensive to swap people out. So there's this idea in project management of the iron triangle. I actually don't like this metaphor a ton, but I think it works in this case. So we've got scope, time, and cost. And if you want it to take less time, well, then the scope needs to go down or the cost needs to go down. So we have these like different points in the triangle that we can play with, but they have this sort of fundamental relationship with each other. So in traditional planning, all right, we're gonna fix the scope. We're gonna agree on what we're gonna build up front, but we're gonna make our best guess at how long it's gonna take. And we're going to make our best guess at how much it's going to cost to do that, how many developers we need, like all that kind of stuff. So on Agile, we flip that completely upside down. We say, we're going to control time and cost, but we're going to vary scope. So we're going to have these developers work on this for this amount of time, and the amount they get done, well, that's variable. And this is a radical paradigm shift in how we view software, because all of a sudden, like, it's one of the most common questions I get asked about Agile is like, oh, but we have this due date and the client needs this, and then we have these conventions that we're going to demo the fucking thing at, and we have this big release date we got to hit. Okay, cool. We're fixing the time on this. Whether that's we're done on August 22nd, there's no use doing anything after that. Or we're committing to the next 2 weeks, we're committing to the next week, and it's going to cost this much. You're fixing those things. How much gets done, that's the thing that changes. And so it forces you to make priority decisions. All right, well, what is the most important thing? If we could only get one thing done, what would it be? And then the next thing, and then the next thing. And so all the gold plating and shit that always seems to sneak into projects on the left, that never makes it to the things on the right, because we run out of time, we run out of money. Perfect. Also, by keeping the scope flexible, we can go, oh, those things that we were planning on building, drop them. Microsoft came out with a version of those. We're not even going to try to compete with it. So we'll just take those parts out of this. Also, we saw this new market opportunity for this other thing. So can we get those pieces in? That's the shift. And then capacity. Issue with capacity is like the control side of management history. They always want to maximize their resources. This was like the guiding principle behind Taylorism, is we got a maximum efficiency out of every single person. And they hired like multiple managers to make sure that all the little worker bees are working as hard as they can, and tracking their potty breaks and accounting for all their hours. So this shit on DenverDevs last week, someone who's like, hey, anybody who's at lower than 40-hour-a-week utilization, just let us know. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about with 100% utilization. The problem is, if you're at 100% capacity, as soon as you add one more thing to it, that one more thing isn't the thing that is unstable and like kind of wobbly. The whole damn thing is. Now nothing can get out of the system because everything is over allocated, and it completely disrupts your flow. So if you've ever been really overwhelmed by something and it keeps you from getting anything done, even though you have plenty of time technically to get something done, that's the principle at play there. As soon as you go over allocated, the whole thing collapses. Now, if you run with headroom, not at capacity, you can tolerate all kinds of fluctuations in the amount of work and keep the flow moving. That's the big idea there. Cool. So that was some ideas about flow. I'm going to pause for questions about flow related things before we move on to team structure.
Are there any known like industries where Agile is not effective?
So there used to be this really common idea that, well, we do Agile when it doesn't matter. Software, if I'm making a social networking app, who gives a shit whether or not it works? But the implication there is always that the predictive stuff is really high quality and works well, and the Agile stuff is really sloppy and doesn't work well. And that's absolutely not true. We're going to see some examples of that when we talk about the quality section, but predictive planning is a bug factory. That's all it does. And so like, I think I used to buy into the idea too that like, well, when it's really important, if it's life or death, if any of these things, then we got to do the predictive approach. But I don't think that shit's true either. If I was to come up with a scenario where I wouldn't apply adaptive ideas, it would be, if we're just doing assembly of things, that's a different story. So if you're trying to coordinate a bunch of people building houses off of a blueprint, then sure, predictive planet, why not? But that step in programming, that's compiling. That's automated for us anyway. The like assembly stage is not a concern for us. We're designing new houses every single time. And if we weren't, then just use somebody else's solution. Like, all right, cool, then just use WordPress or whatever. All right, well, you can't use WordPress, then we have to build something. Then it really pays to be adaptive, because the reason you weren't doing that is that your case is a little bit different. So I wouldn't do it for assembly things. There are industries where this is like culturally not accepted, but like every year when as I learn more about Agile, I'm hard pressed to think of an industry that wouldn't benefit from adaptive over predictive approaches.
There was a couple of suggestions in the chat, Kyle. You want to take a look at those and see what your thoughts are on some of those? I think it might be interesting.
Web development, I absolutely think that should be adaptive. Continuously making prototypes, it's a little bit like that, except the distinction I would make between this and prototyping is you can prototype something to communicate an idea, but the prototype doesn't need to like actually work. And as we'll see in the quality section, when you were doing these little increments, they're not sloppy. They're supposed to be production ready, bulletproof, high quality things. Now, that's not to say that we so ergo don't prototype. Just be very clear about what the purpose of a prototype is. Prototypes communicate things, they help you learn things. The lean startup, for example, loaded with ideas that you should probably never do in production, but they generate a ton of valuable knowledge. And that's worthwhile. You should absolutely do that kind of thing. But I think there's this assumption like, well, and then you use that as the basis for your real product. And you don't have to, and you generally shouldn't. Federal software development. So I got some heat for saying this the other day. So with government contracts, they want to see the big plan up front. But here's the funny thing about that. Those predictive organizations, they can't stick to the plan either. If we go look at this what actually happens thing, that's government projects. That's every predictive project, including the ones that they had the heavily detailed plan for. So the thing I caught heat for is all right, give them their detailed plan and then throw it the fuck away. Use an adaptive process to actually build the software. You'll do a better job and everybody will be happier, including the bureaucrat who wanted the big binder of plans and shit. But like I said, there's some different industries have way bigger cultural hurdles to overcome that they find out you do that, then you get sued and whatever else. So don't tell me when you're getting locked up, don't tell them old man Coberly told you that this is okay. Cool. Yes, that is exactly what happens with the big binder. It gets shoved in the closet. All right, Next topic, team structure. So the way that you structure your team, I heard this really good saying once that was, you decide your application architecture when you hire your devs. Hire a whole bunch of SQL devs, oh, guess what your solution is going to be written in. And I think that applies to organizations also. If you want to have an agile organization, all right, well, you need to have people who are cool with blurred responsibilities and a lot of other things. So let's explore this idea a little bit. So like self-organization is, I would call that a core principle of just about every real agile approach. Birds do it, bees do it, even tiny parts of me do it. Let's self-organize. Self-organization is actually like fairly prevalent in nature. And when we talk about emergent systems and stuff, we're talking about self-organization. There's two kind of, but where we don't see that is in a lot of social relationships. Social relationships have historically been mostly hierarchical. And so as we're trying to figure out how we should structure our businesses, like we went with how our regular human relationships look. But I think there's a lot of value in applying these self-organization ideas to our businesses. And it's another one of these things where every year, I think more and more, we're already starting to see how they're also way more appropriate for our social relationships. And this might not be as like hardwired a thing as like was once believed, and that self-organizing social groups are probably a more appropriate way to do that also. So this guy is a cyberneticist who studies self-organization. And I think he gets at what's powerful about this idea and why it's not like some people like hierarchy and some people like self-organization. The cool thing about it is self-organizing teams by definition are suited to their environment. That's the thing that they self-organize in. And as that environment changes, they self-organize to the new shape of the environment. And the point that he's making here is that that new shape, that is more likely to be a shape that would have worked in the old shape and the new shape. This idea is generally referred to as anti-fragility. That's a Nassim Nicholas Taleb idea. But adapting to all of these things, that's not just resilience, although resilience is also a part of this. Resilience is you can just keep hitting me and I can take all the hits and I don't change. Anti-fragile is every time you hit me, I get stronger because I know how to withstand that as well now. And so I think that with the pandemic, we actually saw some pretty good examples of this. There were teams that went, oh shit, we need to change everything. And in the process, found out there's a lot of things they were doing that they didn't have to do before. And so now when they go back to the like normal, whatever that's going to be, they also don't have that waste. And another pandemic could happen a week later and they'd be able to withstand that also. So that's part of the value of having a self-organizing team. So let's go back to the control theorists. These people go, all right, so our dev teams, they're going to have these 9 people. And that's what it looks like on the original planning doc. Those are the original people they hire. That's their dev team. What actually happens is something more like this. They lose a couple people that never end up getting backfilled. They have people who get promoted, people that should not have gotten promoted. They have people they end up borrowing from other teams that never leave. They have people that they borrow over to other teams that they never get back. I made the lines thicker because over time, each of those roles gets heavily siloed off. And they go like, no, I am a back-end developer. I don't do any front-end. You can't make me learn it. So they do their own private work and then throw it over the wall to the next person to do their own little private work. So how I would visualize this, like sometimes catch some shit for People go like, oh, so everybody's just supposed to be able to do everything, supposed to be equally well at everything. And that's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I think these teams should look like is more like this. Like all of these different things that need to get done on your team, all that changes is that you stop saying like, not my job, and change that to like, I'm not very good at that yet. And that simple mindset shift changes everything. So if I just have 5 people that have different things that they're good at, different like levels of depth, some areas, like some people, they're pretty new at this. They don't have a whole lot of depth overall at all. Some people have like depth in multiple areas. All this is good. Your growth plan for the team is to get everybody's dots darker in all of these areas. That's what makes your team both resilient and anti-fragile. And that happens. It happens so naturally if you just let it. And like one of the cool things that happens when you have a cross-functional team like this, it's cross-functional and not siloed, is every one of these people can go on vacation. Every one of these people can like take time off, they can get sick. If the needs of the team completely change, is like, oh, well, we're going with like we're going with GraphQL, so we don't need as much backend developers. Yeah, cool. So I don't do as much of that anymore. I just kind of move over here. Or you end up with a sprint that's really heavy with work in some part of your stack. All right, not a big deal. Move some people over here. And like, people are learning machines. This is just like what we were hardwired to do. And so you can't be engaged in something that is this cross-functional and not pick up a lot more of these skills, which like enables so much more freedom in your team. So I said I was going to talk more about collective commitment, and this is kind of what that looks like. So the economics term for this is the IKEA effect. People get a lot more attached to the things that they make. So I talked about like, oh, well, we made this plan. Also, this happens with software, where like there's a difference between I was told to make a feature that does this, and that is exactly what I did. I don't know why everybody's so mad at me all of a sudden. Instead, it turns into like, all right, customer wanted something that did this. We worked together, came up with something we think works well for that. And then you deliver it to them, and you get to kind of share in the joy of like making somebody's life better. Every time somebody says like, oh, I fucking love that feature, like you get a warm fuzzy because you weren't part of following somebody's instructions to build it. Like you were an integral part of putting that together. And I think that I see this a lot with senior devs and newer folk, where they'll be like, yeah, but we could have planned this better up front. We would have had the crane that like looked good instead of the crumply piece of shit. And like sometimes that's true, but a lot of the time that never changes if you don't let it get better. Teams need to learn how to work with each other and figure out like where their strengths and weaknesses are and that kind of stuff. So it's very healthy to like empower people to do that. And what you'll find is that like, oh shoot, that wasn't quite up to our quality standards, so we had to bring somebody in to help guide this person to get it up there. And then you end up having less and less and less of those conversations over time. Next thing I want to talk about is stand-ups. So this is what an actual stand-up is. So you have this cross-functional team that is like takes ownership over the things they make. And once a day, they get together and talk about how they're going to make the day worthwhile. This has the effect of everybody reaffirming to each other that like, we're all still here. We're choosing to be here. We're not just stuck here. We can go do other things, especially developers. Developers, you have like the most valuable skill set in the world. If you hate it, go somewhere else. But you don't. You choose to be here, and you choose to keep trying to make it better. That's what a stand-up is. It's not a status update. You get your status update from things called information radiators. These are burn down charts. These are storyboards. Like these are like physical things that you can look at and see and go, oh, That's the status of that. You don't need to talk about it in the meeting. A status meeting is this boring as shit, really long ceremony where everybody like brainlessly reports what they did for the last 24 hours. Nobody is listening to anything they're saying. There's usually like some stakeholder who's there judging the things people are saying. In Agile, we talk about the chicken and the pig. So chicken and the pig is, chicken and pig want to start a restaurant. And chicken goes, I know, we'll call it ham and eggs. And the pig goes, no, thank you. You'd be only involved, but I'd be committed. So the rule in stand-ups is that it's pigs only. You have only people who are committed to the project. They're the only people who are allowed to participate in a stand-up. If there's somebody else there, like a manager who isn't really part of the team or a customer or whatever, they're allowed to go, but they're not allowed to participate. And like, it baffles me when I hear that some little stand-ups are like an hour long, half an hour long or something. They're supposed to be like 5-10 minutes. So if you wondered like why your stand-ups suck, that's why. Okay, a couple specific roles that show up a lot on Agile teams and how they're different. So product owner and Scrum Master are very specifically from Scrum, but XP and some of the Agile frameworks, they have like equivalent ideas. So for XP, for example, equivalent of a product owner is the on-site customer, which may or may not be your literal customer, but there's some kind of customer representative who can answer questions for the team immediately. So when the team is working through something and they go, okay, should it be this or this, this or this? The customer is empowered to say yes or no. So they're the team's external interface with the rest of the company, with the marketing team, with your like actual customers. They're the ones who like spend most of the time in communication with them. Versus your Scrum Master, Scrum Master is inward focused. Scrum Master is, this is how I can help this team be the best team. And so these are all the different roles that a good Scrum Master will fulfill. But they're not the same thing. They should absolutely not be the same person. And neither of them are project managers. Project managers are responsible for the success of the project, and they tell people what to do, and they own the schedule, and they own this, and they own that. Super not the case with either of these roles. In fact, neither the Scrum Master or the product owner are allowed to tell anybody how to do their job. What a product owner is allowed to do is say what's important, and when something is done. You can go, that is not high enough quality, that's not important, this is important. That's the authority that they have on the team. Scrum Master, their authority is they can tell you whether or not you are following the rules of Scrum. Or the equivalent role in XP is the coach. You are allowed to like say whether or not everybody is adhering to group norms. That's it. You can't tell people what frameworks to use. You can't tell people what time it should be done in. You can't make estimates for them. You can't adjust people's estimates. You can't do shit. That's the end of the responsibilities of those two roles. And that confusion has, I think, hurt more Agile adoptions than absolutely anything else. Because the PMI, Project Management Institute, which like IMO is a terrorist organization, has like brainwashed one generation of project managers after another of this command and control style. And product owners and Scrum Masters, this comes from a very free side of management history. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say about team structure. I'll take a couple of questions here.
So I missed a little bit of when you were talking about project management, but you're saying that the project manager is kind of the person who's deciding like the technicalities of what the team is going to do, or at least pointing towards a direction.
Oh, sorry, say that one more time.
So you said that a project manager is a person who's sort of directing the team on where to go from a technical standpoint, not necessarily like specifically telling people how to do their jobs, but more of like, here's the direction we want to go. Like, okay, maybe our front end framework is going to be React or something like that. If we want to use Node.
Or they might go, No, I read the TOB index, and so you need to be using Java on that because that was really high up on the TOB index. You'll see that kind of stuff a lot, or they'll go, how long does this take? And the team will go, probably about 2 weeks. They'll go, make it 1. That's very like project management approach.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to scoot through these next 2 sections. So quality, a couple topics on quality. So what quality means is fitness for purpose. So like, I don't know why this is the one that always comes into my head. I'm thinking about plastic silverware. High quality plastic silverware, it's like clean and can puncture your food. Well, it holds your food well enough to get it in your mouth, and then you throw it away. That's it. Doesn't need to last any longer than that. Plastic silverware doesn't need to last for a week, a month, year. It's fitness for purpose. You'd call that high quality plastic silverware. Versus you've probably used plastic silverware where you put it into chicken or whatever and the tines break off and they stand, so that's low quality plastic silverware. So this is W. Edwards Deming. This is mid-century, he says this, and I think this is one of the most like radical ideas, that you cannot test quality into something. So if you have a QA department or something that's happening at the end of the waterfall, that doesn't mean that the product is any more or less quality. They can discover it, they can find out whether or not it works, but no tester can make the product better. They can send it back to a developer to do the job they should have done the first time. And so this is why we have things like TDD and BDD that make us be real explicit upfront about how we expect something to work. And if we have that to go off of while we're developing, then we're already getting the confirmation that we need that it's free of defects or whatever else. Or when a tester finds a defect, something that we didn't document, then we can write the test for that and make the test pass. That's a quality approach to software development. And it's why test driving code is like so intrinsically tied to Agile. I spent a lot of time over the last 5 years in particular, 7 years now, I guess, talking about like Agile soft skills, basically. But there's an entire suite of hard skills that go along with this also that make sure that we're releasing something that we can iteratively build on. I gave a talk last night about how we would apply BDD in Vue, for example. And one of the reasons that matters, the reason that we need to make sure that shit works at every step along the way is as the complexity of something goes up, the speed goes down. And where you see this in software is, oh, well, we were rushing to get this out the door, so we cut this corner, so we cut this corner, so we cut this corner. That's fine when the app's small. It gets bigger, it gets more complex. You can't hold the entire app in your head anymore. Then all of a sudden it goes, ooh, this looks like bad code, but I don't know what it's even supposed to do. And it doesn't have any tests. So I'm scared of changing it. And then you end up copying and pasting the code into some other part of the app and making a minor tweak to it. And now you end up with 20 different implementations of the same idea scattered all over your code base. Uh-oh. So once you're in a code base like that, not too easy to get new features in. New features become scary. And at some point, you just can't get any shit done anymore. So I'm going to skip this section. But basically, tech debt is, first of all, Ward Cunningham is the guy who came up with the idea of tech debt. He was talking about incomplete, like, I'm trying to think of the right wording for this. Something like, oh, well, you can create these things, but you can't update them or delete them. Like, so we have the tech debt of eventually needing to add these features in. What Ward Cunningham was absolutely never talking about was shipping the sloppiest, shittiest version of your code out to save time. It's a super anti-Agile idea. So Agile code is quality code. At every step along the way, We're trying to do stuff that is like production ready, done, doesn't need to be fixed unless we're changing the feature. So that's some stuff about quality. And in this last section, measurement, these are like, I think where a lot of organizations start with Agile is they start with the measurements without any of these like underlying things in place. So, and if there's an overriding principle in Agile measurement, it's that we care about things being accurate way more than we care about them being precise. So the way that this concept was explained to me was, if I said that Denver is about 10, 15 miles from my house, that's accurate. If I said that it was 4,322.7 miles from my house, that's very precise, but it's not in any way accurate. And so a lot of the predictive plans generate these hyper precise measurements that have no basis in reality. So we're going to sacrifice precision in favor of accuracy. So first one's user stories. User story has 3 parts to it: a card, a conversation, and a confirmation. The important part of this is the conversation. And the reason that like your PM assigning you JIRA tickets and shit is like driving you batshit crazy is that the conversation, the reason that like you do it on a physical card that's kind of small and you can't write down all of the details is because you can't write down all of the details. If you could, you know what that's called? Programming. So we're always like dealing with incomplete information. So by relying on the conversation, we're innately saying like, it's impossible to capture all of the details, but let's keep talking. And we're going to develop this super mushy, the controlled people in history don't like this. We're going to develop a shared mushy understanding of how this thing is supposed to work by showing each other examples and having like an ongoing conversation about something. That's the like slapping wheels on the boat. That didn't quite work. Gosh, I didn't even realize it had to also work on land. That's the conversation part of this. They are not technical. The most insane thing that I see teams do is they'll have stories that are like, as a database, I want a new schema so that I can. The reason they're called user stories is they're supposed to measure something that's valuable to human beings. That's how we measure progress on the project. All the technical shit, your customers don't care about it. They want it to work. And so if like you're doing some kind of performance optimization, why? They go, oh, well, because the app's too slow for the users. Okay, well then the user story is about making the app faster, not achieving this particular kind of thing. So that's why we're keeping tech details out of it. And we're trying to measure meaningful progress. So Gantt, one of the people from the control side that we talked about, came up with this chart, which is one of the worst horror shows. This is how predictive managers are trying to manage all that complexity with all the different moving pieces. But the thing that gets so easily lost in this is that you are 0% of the way done all the way to the end of the project. And assuming you ever get to the release, then you're 100% done. So you've carried all of the risk of the project the entire time until the very end where you get 100% of the benefits. That's bonkers. So instead, what we do is we have this idea of MMFs and user stories. A user story is some little like functional piece of the software that a user would find independently valuable. An MMF is a grouping of user stories that's worth releasing. So it's something that you could put out a product announcement about and somebody would go, oh, cool, I'll check that out. Or I'd be interested in buying your product. So it's some kind of combination of user stories. But usually at those minimally marketable features, that's when your releases happen. That's when users should be getting new software, if not continuously all the time. Story points. This one gets fucked up a lot. So story points are a tool for relative estimation. So absolute estimation would be, all right, that stack of coins on the left, how high is it? And you go, oh, I don't know. 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches. Estimates go all over the place. Humans are terrible at estimation. But if I go, all right, the thing on the right is 1/2 inch. Now how high is the stack of quarters? And you go, probably like 1 3/4 inches, 2 inches. Relative estimation, humans are super good at. And so this is where story points come from. Story points let us measure relative complexity of something without having to do these traditional project management style huge estimates, or even small estimates that have huge amounts of error that add up or multiply over time. And then you measure story points with velocity. This is how many you're getting done in each iteration. And so in this is normal. This is what we want to see. We want to see a flat trend line on that. The ones that you worry about are, it's going up. Why is it going up? Might be that we're being more efficient. Could also be that we're cutting corners. Or why are we slower than we used to be? Did we lose people? Are we accruing tech debt? So the entire point of this isn't to like reward the team for increasing their velocity or something. It's cans on the chicken wire fence. When they start shaking, it's just a call to go investigate and figure out what's happening. So if there's like an overriding message to that, don't min-max made up numbers. The ratio of Schrute bucks to Stanley Nichols doesn't fucking matter. It's all of the agile measurements are only meaningful within a team to measure the health of the team, which is also why you can't measure points between teams. It just doesn't work. And part of that is common cause versus special cause variation. Common cause variation is things vary. The stories are like literally different things. Literally different people did them. And so some of that, it's just natural that it varies a little bit. Special cause variation is like, there's a problem. And it's very difficult to tell the difference between those. But things like velocity can help you like sniff out common cause from, so this is common cause variation. The one on the bottom and the top, those are special cause variation. Which is also why these things don't work in performance reviews. Can't use points of velocity, they're made up. Can't use the success of the project, probably wasn't your idea to do the project to begin with. So if it doesn't work, that's not really on you. You can't use ratings because now we're taking a subjective thing and pretending like it's math. Really, you can't use numbers at all. Well, shit, how do you figure out who the good people on the team are? Use performance previews. This is the exact same idea as TDD, it's just for the team. You're saying, this is what I think should happen in the next week, and then it does or it doesn't. That's a thing you can have an actual performance conversation about. But using the metrics as a substitute for management is 100% a bad idea. Don't do it. And that's what I have to say. Cool. I'll do a couple questions. I know we're running a little bit late.
So if you're measuring the productivity of the whole team as like sort of a means of valuing that team, how do you deal with like valuing individual employees in the sense like certain people might bargain for different salaries and whatnot, and companies need to know where, you know, their limits are?
Sure. So I think a lot of that, let's see if I can get back up to the top. So valuing the team as far as like how successful the product they make is, that's a bad idea. And the reason why is because of, let's see if I can find the slide, is because of this. Sometimes it was a great idea. Sometimes the team did a killer job implementing the idea. Whatever, external factors, stuff that's completely outside of anyone's control. Why would you punish the team for that? Now, the flip side of this is also true. Team has a wildly successful project, and so all of them get rewarded handsomely for something that shouldn't have been like their responsibility to begin with. So as a manager, you have to be really careful about what you do and don't choose to reward. And like you want to encourage people to take risks and experiment, do smart experiments, but as soon as you make like team performance, the performance of their output a part of that, something that they don't control, you're kind of fucked. And so that's why you don't want to do that. So it would then follow, you don't want to measure individuals on the team due to some like part of that. Really, if you want to like manage the performance of teams and you want to manage the performance of people, you have to, wait for it, manage them. You can't do it with like dumb metrics and shit. You need to be like a heads up manager who's engaged with your teams, engaged with your people, and works with them directly. It's mushy, but guess what? So is all of this. So is like your manager giving you a 4 instead of a 3. It looks like math, but it's also just made up. The math is just a smokescreen so they don't have to feel bad that they made a decision. The stuff is messy. Like, embrace the messiness.
That makes sense.
Yes, and Brooks, that's not Hebb's law. That's, fuck. Hebb's law is neurons that fire together, wire together, and survive together. That one also has a name. But yeah, when metrics can become goals, they cease to have value as metrics because, as Guillermo said, the problem about metrics is that people will hit them. I think the full quote is something like, people will hit them even if they have to destroy the organization to do so. I'll do 2 more questions.
Kyle, so I think it's safe to say that there's not too many companies that are following Agile as you've described it to us.
Correct.
What recommendations do you have for helping change the culture of a company to be more like this Agile?
Sure. 2 approaches. One, which you've experienced directly and like seen the good and bad consequences of, is bubble of excellence. So bubble of excellence is the organization does not embrace any of these concepts. However, this team or this like superstructure around a team does. And so the goal with a bubble of excellence is you are trying to become an example that the rest of the organization can model off of. Because a lot of this stuff, especially to like somebody who's from the control style of thinking that almost every MBA program like very heartily embraces, is going to be a tough sell on like, let the teams organize themselves, like have the engineers talk to users, like that kind of stuff. So you become a bubble of excellence and people go, oh, wow, this team is doing super well. What can we borrow from that? And you go, boy, do I have something to sell you. Now, like, it could be that, and this was the case with both of us when we did this, that the organization goes, nope, I'm incapable of seeing that, bye. And they kind of just let the bubble of excellence pop. So that's like 2 possible outcomes to that. The other strategy that you can approach is what Deming did. Deming was a consultant and would only talk to whoever was in charge of the company. Is not talking to the salespeople, not talking to middle managers, not talking to VPs. He would only talk to CEOs, presidents, that kind of thing. And the reason why is because if they're not bought in, the fuck does the rest of this matter? And like, so the consequence there is then you have to sell them on this being a good idea. The upside is if they're bought in and like they have the leadership capacity to truly lead their organization or even just allow it to be led, now you've got a real shot at this taking hold. Because like, and this is my personal philosophy here, I think that people want to be free. I think that is like an innately like natural part of being human. And so if you're allowed to be free, if you, this is why in modern Agile, down at the bottom there, one of the core principles of modern Agile is safety. This is making people feel safe about their work, about their jobs, that they're not going to like, not get a good performance review because they didn't get enough stories through to contribute to velocity, like that kind of shit. If you can create a safe enough environment, like this stuff can flourish very quickly. So those are like 2 different approaches you can take to getting there. Cool. Thank you so much for letting me rabble at you.
Woo. Thanks, Kyle.
Yep.
Awesome.
Good
Thank
heart,
you, Kyle. Thank you, Doug, also for presenting. So that's it. That's all we got for you this evening. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for our first virtual meetup. if you have suggestions on how we can improve this, because I mean, I'm just going to assume we're going to be doing this remote for next month too. Feel free to drop us a line in Denver Devs. But otherwise, thank you all. Stay safe, stay sane, and I don't know, get drunk.
Good seeing you guys. See you next month.
One step ahead of you, baby.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
See y'all.
See ya.
Have a good one.